Welcome to Turning Point, stories and strategies from the world of business. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun. And today is joining me is David Cree. And David and I, we actually go back quite a number of years to where we first met. And David's just got some of the most interesting stories and some of the most interesting direction that I see from entrepreneurs today, where they're doing something that is not only entrepreneurial, but has such a terrific social foundation and is setting a model in a lot of ways for having a social enterprise that is just unbelievable. So before we get to kind of, I guess, to that, David, and I know you'll explain it much better than me, you're probably cringing over my description. But before we get to that, I actually want to go back to, because I think I met you, I'm not sure. It was, I bet you 10, 15 years ago, in one of your first sort of creative industry roles. And I just wanted to go back to where you started in business.
Yeah. I was trying to think of that myself as you were talking about, like, where did we actually meet? And it would have been in Edmonton for sure. Back then I was living there. And I was running a search engine optimization agency, just purely focused in that space. So I was doing a lot of consulting and just SEO on different clients, marketing needs, lots of search engine marketing and stuff. And I used to do a lot of business networking events, through Chamber and through Startup Calgary. I want to feel like maybe it was Startup Calgary that we would have met, but I'm not sure if you were involved back then.
I was, like back then we were based in Edmonton with my previous business, but it was down in Calgary a lot. It's the typical Edmonton story, like where Calgary here, Edmonton here, but really Alberta is not a big place. So you're kind of a provincial economy, I guess. And I suspect we met there.
I think it was like 2008 that I expanded from Edmonton to Calgary. So my agency had an office in Calgary and an office in Edmonton doing SEO.
Okay.
And that so that's when I sort of transitioned down toward Calgary.
Okay, so it was somewhere around that time. I think we were earlier, somewhere we met in there. So back then, I know because I was in the creative industry back then as well. How did that? Let's explore that a little bit of how you, sort of grew this business at that time. Because you mentioned just 2008, 2009. I remember that was. The long way around, that's where Dryrun came from, because it was a really challenging time. That's where, battling with the cash flow, that was my sort of thing that years later kind of led to Dryrun. How did you expand during that time?
I didn't. I started ClearPath, I say 2004, 2005.
Okay.
It grew quite a bit up till 2008. I expanded to Calgary in 2008. 1 month before the crash hit. Remember the huge bubble crash, right? I do
remember it well.
August 2008, right? And so, I lost half my clients within a week, I think, that month. Oh, wow. I remember.
Yeah.
Had to lay off, employees, and then just a whole bunch of other life circumstances happened at that time as well. And so that actually, I kind of closed up ClearPath through 2008, 2009. I sold it to an Edmonton agency, actually, that still is doing marketing up there. And I just sold my client list, basically. Yeah. And I just went back into sales for a bit, ended up back in marketing in Calgary at a larger publicly traded agency, and that was sort of stepped up into Calgary and owned an agency down here for a few years, and it just kind of grew a client base down here until I want to say 2015. Got out of marketing.
Okay, yeah. So it was such the interview with my last guest for the last episode, we were talking about that too, and it's amazing how it was a fundamental shift for him, that sort of 2008, 2009, like the crash and then the recession, and it's amazing. People sort of our vintage, that is such a key point for so many of our stories, and we were fortunate, because our clientele, I think about 70% at that point were government contracts, and so the only thing good with that is that they took a longer time to close,
Yeah.
But when they shut down, they closed for years, and that just bought us a little bit of time to turn the ship and go, okay, we have to go into basically the corporate world as it starts to grow, come back to life. But we got to leave this behind, because when it's gone, it's gone. And it was such an odd time. And so it's amazing how many stories I hear of just that disruption and how it moved people to start something new. And so that's what interesting is you basically leapt and went right into building something else and had that up to 15.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. I don't know.
Yeah.
Common Good, our most recent iteration, was probably my fourth or fifth business altogether.
Okay.
So yeah, it was, sorry, my phone decided that I was trying to talk to it.
Listening to
it was, I've always sort of just, you're always thinking of ideas, maybe, like that's my sort of strength in all of it, is ideas, strategy, that kind of stuff. And so I'm constantly thinking up new ideas and evaluating them and wondering if they'd be a solid, sort of business or not. Back in that process again now, where I'm sort of figuring out what the next iteration is for me.
Yeah. Let's because I know you sort of came from creative industry. That's where I come from. I could chat all day long, but where you went from here was so interesting. The story that led to I called it a social enterprise. I don't know if that was the right terminology.
No, that's right.
Is it okay? Okay, good. I hit a single there. I got it right. Yeah. But the story here was so interesting because you went from like creative industry to really solving a fundamental problem and something that is a model that sounds like you'll be able to move forward with in some way. Tell me a little bit about this. I guess I shouldn't say turning point. I'm slide that in there, but it was like, how did this come about?
It's a great question, and I think it fits really well with what we were, because coming out of the marketing creative industry, particularly in my last agency, I started to get just really extremely burnt out on consumerism.
Yeah.
So I was landing big name brands. We were doing big projects, and I think one of the more recent ones was I landed a major European brand for like a $500,000 contract. And I remember, when I hung up the phone, getting that close, it did nothing. I didn't give a shit about the fact that I had just got this client and that I was about to do this marketing promotion for them. Like it just, it lost all its value to me. The other thing that was a major issue for me back then was what I called the plumber effect. And like, if you hire a plumber because your toilet's broken, you don't necessarily I don't know anybody anyway that would stand over the plumber's shoulder and tell him, I think you should use white pipe instead of black pipe. And I think the pipe should go 2 more inches to the left as opposed to 2 inches to the right. And, could you change this? And how about putting a starburst that says for sale on this, I felt like I was a professional marketer. I had really sunk my teeth into that industry and really had helped tons and tons of clients get incredibly good effect in their business, in sales and stuff. And then to have people like want to change what you're doing all the time and not listen to your expertise from that standpoint. Like there's kind of it's a very common thread in that marketing space where you're dealing with owners and brand directors that think they know more than what per se in marketing, and it's just this dance that I got tired of, and so for me it was two parts of the motivation. One was that I really wanted my own brand that I had full control over, that all my decisions around marketing were mine to live with and die with kind of thing, and to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I loved that experience with Common Good, of creating that brand, deciding what it would stand for, and how it would present itself in the world, and then seeing its success as a brand to winning awards and growing quite well in Calgary. That was a very, very rewarding creative marketing experience for sure. Very rewarding to do that. And then secondly, the idea of the consumerism and just being burnt out on, just selling more stuff. It was always like, hey, we can help you sell more. It's like, who cares? How can we impact more? How can we change our world? That's where I was really getting to. And that came from, there was a leadership course that I took many, many years ago. I've always been sort of interested in social causes on the background, and I've done volunteerism in third world countries. I've done sort of all that kind of stuff in the background, long time. But this one leadership course, there was a course on social justice in Canada. And the prerequisite of that course was to go, you could either read a bunch of books and write some papers, which I just hated doing that stuff, or you could go spend a day being homeless and beg for $15. And so I chose to dress up the part in the streets of Edmonton. And I hit the streets in the morning, and I was just absolutely gobsmacked by the experience. If there was ever a turning point in my life, it was that day.
Yeah.
Because what I experienced looking and playing the part of a homeless person in the streets of Edmonton, and then to have these people that I considered my neighbors, fellow Edmontonians, treat me the way they did was just absolutely horrendous. Like, nobody would look you in the eye. You get called names. You just felt this incredible shame for being in the same space, for being in the visual, sort of framework of other people, because they make you feel like you're just, nothing.
Yeah.
And then to strike up a few conversations with people that were on the street, who were also begging, and to see how many were, struggled with some really deep mental illness. They really should be in a hospital getting treated by doctors. Yeah. And, ever since Klein and Reagan and all those guys closed all mental institutions across North America, sort of closed up mental health care and went into this sort of community model that doesn't work for the poorest of our society. And so that's driven homelessness up. And I just started learning about all this stuff after having that experience that day, and seeing how Canadians treat it, how much of a big problem it is here. And so that just sort of stuck with me in the back of my head for many years. Yeah. And at the same time, through that course, I met this guy who was running a very small little laundry program for recovery guys, and having great success at helping them recover through just folding laundry, working. It was just such a peaceful atmosphere for them. And so I had this idea, that sort of small nugget of a business idea from, like way back 2006, 2007, I'd say, is when I first sort of saw that. And I thought, I wonder if you could run a laundry business for restaurants and hire people out of the shelters and do a recovery program. Like, why not make an actual business out of this and make it go? Yeah. And then I went back into, my marketing stuff and whatnot, made my money. And when I came to the end of that rope, where I was just getting really tired of consumerism, really tired of the marketing game, it just really felt like, okay, this is time to start playing with this business idea. And the one thing that I did, I might be jumping ahead of where you want to go, but the one thing
this is the interesting part of the story to me. So I'm finding this really fascinating. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. So I started playing with that idea, and then I like I said, I'd run, this is like my fifth business, right? Every other business that I had done, I kind of came up with an idea, created a quick little website, put my, shingle out within weeks, kind of thing. Like, I didn't really do a lot of planning. I just went for it and had some success, but a lot of issues too, a lot of learnings, right? As we all do. And so with Common Good, it was very much like, no, we're not going to just jump into this. We're going to really research. We're going to do a lot of planning. And so we spent it's like 6-8 months of just deep planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually when I got back a hold of you again, was right in that period with Dryrun, because I've run marketing companies and consulting. Like it's always been more of a service-based business that I've run. That's like consulting, direct fee, sort of whatever. Whereas this was inventory, buying tons of product, renting it out over contract periods, figuring out if like to know whether or not you were going to be profitable or not was a whole different ball game from running a marketing agency. And so that's why, we saw what you guys were doing at Dryrun, and it was just like this perfect fit for us to be able to actually run these scenarios of like, okay, well, what if we did this and forecast it out. So we used it as this, pre-revenue forecasting platform to then convince our investors that, we had done our homework and we had a good model, right? And so it actually, that was a really interesting part. I also took it to, you would be familiar with what used to be the VA Angels, and now they're Valhalla Capital.
Yes. Yeah.
And they run the Randy Thompson runs the base camp sort of class constantly, where it's just for entrepreneurs, to get invest, or people who want to know if they're investment ready, or for angels how to invest good, right?
Yeah.
And I actually went into his course over a weekend with Common Good to decide if it was investor ready for me. You know what I mean? Like we had done all this planning, all this thought, and it was kind of at that trigger point where it's like, okay, well, we have all this. Do we do this? And I took it through that course and had to pitch it at the end of that course to investors, right? Had to pitch Common Good. And that was kind of my goal, was to like take this, fictional business and say, okay, how does this play over this weekend if I really analyze it? So I analyzed all this stuff, figured out my model for fundraising, pitched it, and had 3-4 investors come up to me afterward and say, we're in.
Nice.
Let us know when you start, right? Yeah. And it wasn't like they loved the model, but they loved the local impact on community.
Yeah.
And that was really what helped us sort of launch the business. So we got that interest. We decided, let's go for it. Ended up launching on a crowdfunding platform locally through ATB Booster, and that was really successful. We won that, and sort of rest is history from there. The last 3 years of working double shifts and getting slowly burnt out again.
Yeah. Well, and that's such an interesting thing, because it's like a great idea and a great vision and a great, a goal is so critical for a business, but it's just a prereq, right? And it's the operations side that is execution is so it's fundamental. That's where you make or break, right? And the fact that you went into something that was it's a great vision, but it's also tricky. Like that is a tricky business to dive into. Also one that it was an area you hadn't been in before, but you took that different approach. You realize that's a different approach, and you took, like you said, you took months and you figured this out, and you worked through the operational side. And I see more and more like how fundamentally important that is. Like I look back to, when we started Dryrun here, and it was a little more like let's go build something and jump off a bridge. Operations comes later when you're like, holy smokes, I got to figure this out.
I know people will buy this once I build it. I don't need to research that.
No one else. It'll be fine. Like, man, I'll be rolling it in 3 months.
Build it and they will come.
Yeah. That's, oh man, the biggest fundamental mistake by any startup. And that was, I was right there, and I learned the hard knocks along the way so much. But can you describe a little bit in detail, like the operation of this business? How did it work? And how did you, like, it seems like a really monumental task on even an operational side and everything. How did you make everything work? And what exactly did you do?
Um, it got reiterated pretty consistently. Like I would say, we reiterated our operations at least every 6 months.
Okay.
So it was. So when we started, we actually went into the homeless shelter, and we asked them, here's what we want to do. We want to hire your people, but we need laundry facilities. And they actually had a big commercial facility in there. And so we would go in at 7 o'clock at night. We had an agreement with them. They shut off all their operations 7 o'clock at night. And we would walk in with our laundry and launder everything and then put it back in the van and get out. So we had no facility to ourselves. We just had a set of washing machines to use, basically.
Yeah.
And my wife's minivan. And so we took that, and we got our first 4 or 5 customers, 4 or 5 restaurants. And we started doing that nightly, delivering. It was incredibly difficult. We'd work from 7 at night till 2 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Then we'd get up at 5 in the morning and go deliver to restaurants because they expect it, early morning. And then afternoon would be kind of sales and biz dev and business management and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Figuring out inventory, purchasing, fundraising was constant because of the way the model works. So we would, so if a restaurant signed up, maybe they had 6 chefs, and so I would have to buy basically 100 uniforms for those chefs, and I would rent them out to them on a weekly basis, a set of 50 uniforms, let's say. Mm-hmm. So I had 50 uniforms being washed at all times, and I had 50 uniforms sitting at my client's facility, and then every week I went out and changed them up, right? So. Okay. So we had, large sort of package of linens for each restaurant, and it was basically really just a laundry rental, so a linen rental service. It's called laundry. Everyone calls it laundry, but really the service is renting out clean linens. Okay. That's all it is, right? And we expanded into like doormats, bathroom supplies, chemicals, all this sort of stuff, because that's kind of what, and we were up against really big players. That's the other thing, is that there's no small players in this market. There's no local linens providers. They're all multinational. Aramark just bought Canadian Linens for $2 billion. Cintas bought G&K services for over $2 billion. Like, it is a massive industry, and all the players are huge players. Yeah. And they do full service. So in order to take over those contracts and those customers, we had to be pretty full service as well. Mm-hmm. And so we did that, and then until we kind of outgrew, like, it got to a point where it was becoming really hard to get all our laundry done within the time period. And we actually stopped taking customers for a while. And that happened a couple times through Common Goods, 3.5, 4 years, over the last 3.5, 4 years, where we have these periods where we just kind of hit our max, and we would just tell customers, you have to go on the waiting list for a few months until we're kind of ready to take you on. Then we ended up, when we were about to build a plant of our own, the plan originally, even from the beginning, was to build a sustainable laundry plant, and which would make us the only sustainable laundry in Canada. Everyone is just straight up using as much water, chemical, environmental damage as they can to be cheap. And we were using solar thermal water heating. We were using, more friendly chemicals. All our processes, we were always trying to reduce our carbon footprint and work up to a really high certified B score, to be sort of a certified B social enterprise. Yeah. So when we were looking to build that plant, the costs were just shooting up, and we just had this weird opportunity come up where a local dry cleaner here in Calgary had started hotel service to Banff, Canmore, and all that kind of stuff. And he'd been doing that for about a year or two, and he wanted out of it. He wanted to just focus on his dry cleaning. And so we bought his plant and the entire Banff, Canmore business. So we went from, we pretty much doubled our revenue overnight on that purchase, and went from running 5 days a week, evening shifts, to running 7 days a week, 8 to 12 hour shifts. So we had to double our staff as well. And then we were doing daily delivery out to Banff with a big truck. So we had 3 drivers, 3 routes all of a sudden, and it was just massive. So we ran that for about a year. And actually, it's interesting. Back to Dryrun, we were evaluating our business because it seemed like the more money we made, the more money we were pouring out. Like it just was not catching up at all.
Yeah.
And so the idea of scale was not happening for us at all.
Yeah.
And we started doing these audits. We would do production audits. So we would completely audit every single thing we did from a labor standpoint and costed it all out. Put that all back into Dryrun with two different business channels, and saw that our restaurant retail linen rental was making about 50% of our revenue. It was about 50% of our revenue, but it was only 25% of our labor. And the hotels was making the other 50% of our revenue, but they were taking 75% of our labor.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so they were killing us. So after that sort of series of production audits and evaluating that, we just shut off the Canmore Banff business completely. Kept the plant just to sort of run our local stuff. And so that was great. Actually, things were really looking up. We turned to profitability almost immediately from there. And then our neighbor, like we had a plant neighboring another laundry plant of a mat service, right? They mainly do mat services, but they did some laundry services as well. And we have to deliver mats ourselves. So we were using these guys to do our mats as a subcontractor. And when they saw that we dropped sort of that Canmore business and were really growing more in restaurants, they basically offered and asked to partner with us. And they could see that we were largely inefficient in the plant. Like our sales, delivery, marketing, awesome. Our plant operations, just barely cutting it, Okay. And so they said, we're experts on the plant operations side and all that. Let us do all the laundry part. We'll hire your staff. So they still have the same opportunity that they had previously, but you just come in, grab your stuff, deliver it. And so we decided to go with that route. Reiterated again, kind of sold all our equipment, our plant, shut down that lease, dropped our operational cost way, way down.
Yeah.
But then went into a revenue split, right, with this other company on our contracts. And we were sort of working through that over the last year or so. And interestingly, we weren't happy with the relationship. It was really great operationally and profit-wise, but it was horrible culturally. Oh, okay. So all of a sudden, where we had this plant that we had full control over the culture and our people, and we're dealing with people who are at risk, who have had a major amount of trauma in their life, and so plant workers will argue about who's working the hardest, doesn't matter, what your state in life is. If you're working in a plant and you've got 5 other workers and one guy is sloughing off a bit, everyone gets pissed off at the one guy, right? Yeah. Because they're putting in 8 hours for their money and they go, and this guy's putting in like 5 hours for this same money. Yeah. And so little things like that, right? There's all these sort of interpersonal dynamics that happen in a workplace, which was the playing field for us to allow people to work through their trauma and work through how do you relate to other people again in a healthy way. Dealing with workplace conflict, all that kind of stuff. And when we had our own plant to deal with that, we could really deal with that effectively and bring people through the program. Yeah. When we had a manager on the other side that wasn't part of our company and they had their own culture, their own systems, it just became a totally different ballgame. And really, it just was not any longer a good model for recovering people. So we were right in the process of signing a deal with another laundry company to change our model again to the service and give us a little bit more freedom on our side. And we were going to buy out that laundry sort of in a year. to go back to owning our own plant. And then COVID hit. So
yeah, and restaurants got hit.
Oh, and like our customers are restaurants, spas and gyms, nail boutiques,
all the hardest hit.
Every single one of our customers was closed down except for the pizza joints, anything that had a good takeout business.
Yeah.
But anyone that had a good takeout business, they also took their linens from 100 towels to 20 towels a week, because all of a sudden their volume was drastically different because they weren't doing both in and out, right? So yeah, we went from I think we were doing about 40,000 revenue a month. 40,000 revenue a month, and after 2 days of COVID, we were down to $5,000 a month.
Oh, holy smokes! It's just
just wiped it out.
You can't. It's like I know we mentioned sort of the 2008 that we thought that was quick. This COVID hit harder and faster than anything anyone's seen. Anyone in business has seen, I think, ever. It's and when you mention what you're doing,
and we haven't even seen the bottom of that yet. Like, 'cause right now everything's propped up by the CEWB.
Yeah,
everyone's getting wage benefit. All these restaurants are surviving on that wage benefit. If they didn't have that, they'd be closed.
But
So we kind of looked at that, and we really there was definitely a lot of because we were right on that profitability mark. We were right on this cusp of really breaking free and getting out there.
Yeah.
And when that revenue hit, we had to really look hard at. Everyone was saying, "Oh, this is going to be back in 3 months," And I remember thinking, "There's no damn way this is coming back in 3 months. And even if it comes back, it's going to come back at half the revenue we were before, and it's going to take at least a year before it gets back up." And now I look at it and I'm like, it's 2 years before that laundry would be back up to full revenue.
24 months, easily. Yeah.
Easily, right? And so there was just no path back.
No, there was no alternative.
It was really, it was untenable. So we had to close it. We finished the deal with the other partners. So they service all our customers, do the delivery, the lawn, they do everything on the service, and they give us a revenue cut. So we use that revenue cut to right now pay off some of the debts that we accumulated as a business, but then we've got an ongoing nonprofit deal to use that money that is generated through that laundry business to go back into employment programs. But that's kind of where it lives for now.
Yeah.
And we'll see if there's another iteration for Common Good or not.
Well, and obviously I'm like really sad to hear that. It's us being in the cash flow business. Like, we hear that stuff every day. There were businesses like you that were healthy businesses, profitable, growing, that closed within a week or two, because the model and the dollars just didn't make sense. They just couldn't do it. And now I was just on a call at a conference with Intuit earlier, and they mentioned, actually I have it written down right here, 48% of small businesses have half or less than their regular revenue. Like, that's half the businesses. So we're on top of this all the time. And like you said, like when we looked at they say from industry to industry, the soonest some of the industries that are struggling right now will bounce back, they predict is around 9 months. Most are closer to 24. The average is 17 to 18 months. That's the average industry. And so you have entire industries. Of course, we're here in Canada. I'm looking out, there's a little snow on the ground in Edmonton. I don't know about down in Calgary.
Yeah, it's here. Big flakes.
Yeah, it's that shuts down patios, one of the small slivers of bit of revenue that restaurants have. And it's going to be a real challenge for the next 6 months, and we're going to see, unfortunately, a lot of closures no matter what happens. And it's a difficult time. I wish there is no answer right now, unfortunately. So before, I wanted to learn, this is so interesting what you were doing. I guess there's sort of two things I'm kind of curious about, and I'll let you pick, but like, I'm curious about how you actually sort of built this up, and like you said, the culture and how you help people through trauma. How did you manage that in a business, and how is that going to help you sort of moving forward? Like, what are those learnings there about helping people that are in traumatic situations, but are able to come in and actually like work and be productive and make your business feasible?
Yeah, it was not easy for sure. There was a lot of sort of constant learning, and not easy learning, like hard things with people, tears being shed, and hard life shit that they were going through. And so I would say that the absolute key is that we knew why we were there. Like, we never set out to start a laundry business. We set out to start a people recovery business.
Yeah.
And so that was always the number one core decision maker was, will this help us recover people better?
Yeah.
If this is a decision that just makes us more profitable, but it doesn't help our people or our culture, then it doesn't happen. And so having those kind of guiding principles right from the start, your why, I think, is absolutely critical, particularly if you're doing a social enterprise, because a social enterprise in any form, I think, is tougher. You've got a little bit of a tougher climb because you're trying to do things typically at a higher cost than any of your competitors.
Yeah.
Because social impact always comes at a cost of some sort. Environmental impact, same thing. So figuring out that balance between profitability, right, which all of our sort of shareholder agreements say is supreme primacy. And I think we're, just a very side note, we're starting to see that shareholder primacy go away. Like last year, the Business Council of America, I think, really, really top CEOs from around the world signed that declaration saying we no longer believe that it should be shareholder primacy only. You need to consider all your stakeholders, the planet, your customers, the people that work for you, your partners, in business, that kind of stuff, your supply partners, that kind of stuff. And so that's really healthy to sort of see that.
You brought something up there that I sort of was going to ask two questions, but I'm like, no, this is interesting.
Oh, okay.
But there's a couple, there's so much there that I'd like to unpack because it's so interesting. I think there's a lot to unpack for people that are running businesses that have a goal of helping the world be a better place, right? And I know there was this challenge of you sort of, almost like you said, like bringing in that partner, but now suddenly that you had that culture shift that you had to sort of bring that back home. And that's such an interesting sort of challenge to deal with, because you're still looking at a bigger picture of how do we just make this work, right? How do we make it work? But I did want to I know there's some paths I wanted to kind of explore down there, but if we had hours, I'd be on this for hours because it's so interesting. But I am really interested in, what you've sort of gone through now, and with COVID and everything, what are you seeing on the horizon? Like, what do you think, and when do you think you'll be able to take that next move?
Yeah, great question. I think COVID, it's funny. We talked about 2008, right? And how marked that was for people like you and I who were in business at that time. How much it shifted maybe perspectives or business direction or anything. And I think in those kind of times, you not only sort of think about your business, but you think about yourself a bit too, right? And you get a little bit introspective. Is this really what I wanted to be doing? Is this really what I wanted to accomplish? Is this where I wanted to be at this time? Is this what I wanted this business to be? And I think COVID has probably amplified that 100 times. So
Yeah.
I think there's so many people, whether it's entrepreneurs or just people who were, you know, an engineer in a firm or whatever your job was. Post COVID, you're kind of going, oh man, after spending 5 months at home and seeing life in a very different perspective, I'm not sure I want to go back to that same way it was, you know, or just realizing that, you know, this isn't having the impact. Like I don't have the team that I thought I'd have by now. I don't have the family atmosphere in my company, or I don't have that sort of nonprofit giving legacy that I want. You know, like there's all these sort of areas where people are thinking more about the real meaning and purpose of life, I guess. And so for me and for Common Good, I think we learned so much about tying business with impact through that time, that one of the things on the horizon is to start coaching and consulting other businesses through that exact process of how do you look at your business and where does it even make sense to have impact, right? Like I remember, I try not to be specific, but there's a brand here in Calgary. They have a brand that is, so they do dry cleaning. Their brand is very oceanic, but their nonprofit giving back model is planting trees. I have nothing wrong with planting trees, but your brand is oceanic and you're dry cleaning. What the hell does it have to do with planting trees, right? Like you are your biggest world concern as a laundry company is environment. That's what you are doing serious damage to the environment. So yeah, planting trees is helping the environment, but there's so much more you can do as a business to tie the impact to what your business is actually doing, so that not only you have that legacy, but your customers actually tie in with it, and it becomes part of the brand experience, becomes part of the experience of the culture of that company. And so yeah, helping people sort of figure out what that nugget is that is going to really give them that true satisfaction of feeling like, okay, this is actually doing something. This ties in, it feels right, it fits right. And then what we noticed with Common Good, and I think a lot of social enterprises notice, is that they're also, as much as there's a disadvantage to being a social enterprise from a cost standpoint, there is absolutely an advantage from the way the world is going and the market is going. People are very interested in how are my products made, where are they made, did you pay the people who made this product properly, are you treating them in a safe environment? You know, like people are really concerned about where their products are coming from more and more and more every day. And so that is driving social enterprise to the point where our consumers are demanding that we're more socially and environmentally responsible as businesses. And so I just see a massive drive toward that goal. And when you tie in a great social cause with your business that makes sense, like when we went to restaurants and said, listen, we pretty much do exactly the same thing as company A does for you now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to discount your price whatsoever. In fact, I want you to give me your contract. I'm going to match it word for word on what you pay right now. But the big difference is we're going to come in with someone who's in recovery, and they're going to have a huge smile on their face because you are giving them an opportunity to get their life back. You are having this massive local opportunity of taking away dollars that we're spending on someone to keep them in the shelter, $100,000 a year on average, and giving them their own home where they actually start spending money in our economy again, and it becomes an economic generator. Not a big economic generator, but it takes away some of the strain on the system and helps people come back into community, right? Zero issue selling.
Yeah. Yeah. And how,
like when you have that kind of a sales message, people just say yes.
Oh, they say yes. It's a no-brainer.
Why wouldn't
like it is.
Yeah,
and
no-brainer.
How, I know we don't have a lot of time to unpack this, but how do you manage to compete with, oftentimes, like you said, they're big enterprise sized businesses that really, a lot of them aren't clued in. They don't care. They cut every corner they can to save money. How did you manage to compete with that? Like you said, you were basically in that verge, or you were already profitable. That is a monumental task. How did you manage to do that?
Well, we were just hitting that profitability mark. So it did take us 3 years and, $750,000 to get there. Sorry, what was the base of the question? How did we compete? Oh yeah. So the competition piece. I don't think that this changes with who you are or what size your competition is. and this comes from my marketing regimen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about pain, finding your customer's pain, period.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they have another, local provider or big, massive guy. If you can find the pain that they're experiencing, and also not every customer is going to have that pain, right? So you just find the ones that have the pain that that you fix, mm-hmm. and you address that pain. So like we would walk into a restaurant, and I would phrase my opening. My opening sort of 30-second commercial. I never said, we do laundry, we do it this way, we have this quality, nothing about features and benefits. None of that matters. I would say, listen, people use us because they can't stand not understanding what their bill says. People use us because they can't stand having to babysit the person who comes in and pours chemicals into their basins to tell if they're actually being honest. Mm-hmm. These were statements that said nothing about what we do and only about the pain we addressed. Yeah. We only talked about the competition. We just said people deal with us because they hate that.
Yeah. I'm going to take notes on this. So no, I'm going to be on Slack right after this and just chat with you. Of course, I know I've got really great people working for me, but it's just it always spurs these conversations, and we've got such an excited team, and they're so animated that they're just going to love hearing this. So they're going to want to watch this too. So
I'll do a real quick side thing on that piece right there, because I do some sales training on the side every once in a while. People will ask me to come in and do, because I've done a lot of sales in my life. That's been sort of my forte. Yeah. And if your head salesperson left Dryrun today and went over to your competition, would his sales pitch sound the same?
Yeah, no, we're a fundamentally different different business, right?
Yeah. But a lot of them it's sort of because if they're on features and benefits, or they're on sort of, we're honest, we're great customer service, we answer the phone right away, we do that, everybody says that. You're not differentiating yourself with those things at all. It's all about, because a purchase is emotional. No matter how logical we think it is, it's still ultimately emotional to solve the pain. And so if you just find that pain and just hammer on it and just rip the Band-Aid off, make it bleed as much as you can, investigate that pain, ask them questions about that pain, so that they just get in this mode of, oh, I fucking hate this pain. And then they buy it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you'd love Jeremy, our director of development. You guys are like two peas in a pod, because that's what he does. He knows the pain of our customers, and he's like, we're here to help you. We're here to help with that pain. And it's, so I think we're very fortunate. I'm very fortunate with our entire team, but these are the types of things that we're always trying to look at. And how do we help? How do we differentiate ourselves? We know we're different. How do we better message to that and put the ease that pain? Because especially now during COVID, the cash flow kills a third of companies always. Well, during COVID, this is a different beast, right? Like, it is a really tough environment out there. Of course, no one wants to spend a dime, but they also have to figure out how to manage it. So it's tricky, and we're trying to figure out how we can help through all of that as well. So that's what our passion is about, small business, and how do we help them, survive, and especially the mom and pop shops, the ones that are, owner operator. and a lot of them are bigger and multi-location. Like you said, it's just a bigger challenge, right? Bigger challenge, bigger dollars, but it's still the buck stops with an owner, a family, and that's what we're really passionate about. So
Awesome.
yeah, well, this has been, I know to go on all afternoon if we don't watch it here, but this has been a great conversation. It's such a, your story I just find so interesting. Even when we got on this call here, you did sort of surprise me with the struggles you had with Common Good when COVID hit. Obvious, and like that's what's going to happen. Those industries got hit with an absolute hammer. So I understand that, but I'm looking forward to hearing as this comes out the other side where that next venture is, because I love what you guys do. I love that you're making the world a better place, but you're making it work. The numbers work, the dollars work, and it makes the planet a better place. And that's what every business on the planet should be doing. And hopefully we get more and more and more following your path. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate your time so much. But I do want to ask, how can people get hold of you? You mentioned that you're starting to coach on this. Would love to know how they get hold of you.
I'd love to share real quick. Sure. One thing, LinkedIn is a great way to get a hold of me. I'm David Cree on LinkedIn. Pretty open to connections and love connecting with people over that. Look for the documentary coming out. It'll be on TELUS TV's summer of 2021 for sure, but we'll probably release it before then, and it'll be just Common Good, Breaking Barriers. We had a great documentarian and a great film crew, and we've been filming for the last 3 years, and the documentary is all canned and ready to go now, and it's fantastic, and I'm really excited to see that go out. And then finally, if anyone's interested in like looking at their own business and like how could I have more impact in that, like I'm certainly interested to have those conversations, but another great resource is actually United Nations look at sustainable development goals, right? So UN SDG, you could just Google that and it'll bring up, I think it's the 12 or 13 sustainable development goals of the United Nations, which are, what we consider, this is the world's to-do list. This is what all the sort of experts have come together and said, these things are the things that we need to focus on to help our world right now. And it's everything from environmental to water to equity for women and children, slavery, even logistics systems, making them better so that our footprint is better. So there's just so many areas that in those UN Sustainable Development Goals that you could look at and say, hey, this is one that actually I could plug into my business and start working on. And so I think it's just a great great conversation for businesses to have, to say, is there one of these that we could actually say, we're gonna sign on to this goal and see what we can do about it.
Yeah, that's terrific, Dave. This has been such an awesome conversation, and we'll put some of that information in the notes below. But definitely, awesome. People track Dave down if you have any questions for him, and we need business leaders like you, and I appreciate what you've done so much. And but I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, I'm Blaine with Dryrun. If you haven't picked up on our show here, we help businesses with their cash flow management, and accountants help their clients with their cash flow management survive and thrive, and especially through such a difficult time. Just check us out at dryrun.com if you'd like to learn more. Thanks so much, Dave.
It was great. You live that purpose of helping small businesses. You were one of the guys that I came to early on in this, and if anybody comes to me looking for a business, I always tell them, go to Dryrun, run your numbers off that. It's a great platform that you've made for businesses to evaluate the numbers in a great way, and I think you guys live that value really well.